Welcome to the Money Mastermind Show. Let's talk money.
And welcome to the Money Mastermind Show. Tonight, we are talking about paying off student debt loans. And joining us is Zina Kumok of DebtFreeAfter3.com. Hi, Zina. How you doing?
Hey, guys. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for being here. And, of course, we have the rest of the Money Mastermind Show. We have Kyle Prevost of YoungandThrifty.ca, Miranda Marquit of Planting Money Seeds, Peter Anderson of Bible Money Matters, Tom Drake of the Canadian Finance Blog, and I'm Glenn Craig of Free From Broke. So before we start, I want to direct you to our event page. There should be a Q&A tab there. So if you have any questions regarding student debt loans that you want to ask, feel free to enter them in there. We'd love to take a stab at them. So student debt loans. They are becoming more and more of a necessary evil. And at the same time, student tuition rates are just rising astronomically. It's out of control. How do we work to pay those off? So Zina, I think you have a little bit of a background with paying off student debt loans. Why don't you tell us a little bit about your story?
Yeah, so I graduated college in 2011. And I had about $28,000 worth of student loans, which was average at that time. I think it's a little bit higher now, about $29,000. And I wasn't really, I think, as worried as I should have been about my loans. When I was in school, everything I read said, okay, you should have about the same amount in loans that you'll make in your first year. And I was a journalism major, so I was going to rake in the big bucks. So I wasn't worried. None of my friends, we would talk about how we had loans, but no one seemed worried. And it was almost like a badge of honor. Like I had friends who didn't have loans, and I was like, oh, it must be nice. So when I graduated, it kind of hit me because I had never had credit card debt, never had a car payment, and I didn't know what it was like to owe money. And it really felt like an anchor, and it felt like I couldn't do a lot of things I wanted to do. Like if I wanted to go travel, I was like, well, I have all these student loans, and my first payment was about 20% of my take-home pay, which was huge for someone like starting out, like didn't have any savings and living alone, and kind of expensive. So it just felt like reality just like hit me in the face. Like, okay, like college is over. Like now it's time to pay these back.
Now, let me ask you, you said that based yourself and your friends, it was pretty much understood that what you had out in loans was pretty much expected, like what you should have had out, right? I mean, where did that idea come from? Do you know?
I think, well, and that's the funny part, is I went to school out of state, and most of my friends were in state, and they still had student loans. And so that was almost the crazy part to me, was that, for me, it was like, well, I have to take out loans because going to school out of state, even at a public school, is still expensive. But even for all of them being in state, and getting a scholarship, like they all still had loans. And I had friends who took out the same amount that I had if they didn't qualify for anything else. So it was just everyone had them, and I think when everyone around you is dealing with the same thing, it just becomes the new normal. And no one ever says if that's good or bad. If everyone's doing it, like it must be okay.
Sort of like a keeping up with the Jones of sorts.
Mm-hmm.
I have to wonder if it's something. Sorry, I'll shoot at this and then I'll let you talk. If it's similar to when you're buying a house, when everybody says, no, it's okay if you borrow up to this amount, that's kind of expected, that's fine. And then you borrow that amount and go, wait a second, I don't know if I can pay this back. It's like you're expected to hit this average for your student debt, and then it's like, wait a minute, no, the average isn't necessarily so good to be paying off.
Yeah, and I didn't know anyone who had like a crazy amount of student loans. I don't think I knew anyone who had like 50 grand in loans or 100 grand in loans. So it kind of felt normal to be like 20, 30,000 in debt. Like that felt manageable, and I think we were like, well, we owe the average amount, so we should be fine. And Yeah, I don't think anyone ever wondered, like, okay, what does your salary look like after college? Like, what will that loan payment look like after college? Like, no one ever thought about I don't know, I think we just felt like it would all work out in the end.
Right, and you don't think that 20, 30K could be so crippling when you're on your own afterwards.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think part of the thing is that the cost of college has been rising so fast. Since 1983, the cost for students to attend college has risen at the pace of almost 5 times the rate of inflation. And I think a lot of students just aren't thinking about how much money that really is. The project on student debt says that 15% of borrowers for student loans are defaulting within 3 years of entering repayment. And at for-profit colleges, the rate is 22%. So I think a lot of people are just entering into this whole thing without their eyes wide open, and they kind of just say, yeah, I need to take these loans, I'll take those. And they don't think about other options as far as maybe doing some work study and not taking as many loans, or working while they're going to school, or maybe going to an in-state school and keeping the costs lower. So.
Well, and that was the thing, like for my loans, like I never got like a check in the mail or anything. I think it just went straight to tuition. But I had friends who like they would like get money in the mail, and I think they would pay their tuition, but they still had like enough that they could live on. And I think that allowed people to be a little more reckless. And I don't say reckless because, if you're using to pay rent and groceries, that's fine. But I think if you're not forced to be creative and have fewer resources, then you're not going to come up with like solutions to, maybe instead of going out, why don't we all, have wine at home, or why don't we try not eating out as much? I mean, I had the worst habits in college. Like, I think I was eating out like every other day, and I mean, I was not budgeting at all. And I look back and think how much money I wasted that I could have saved and either put toward my loans or just had a nice little emergency fund when I graduated.
Yeah, it's almost like having a credit card, but you don't actually get the card because they tell you how much of a loan you can get.
Mm-hmm.
And your tuition may only be this much, but they'll give you this much in a loan. Like they'll actually give it to you and just write you a check for the difference that you get to use for whatever you need to use, that you're supposed to be using it for school, for tuition, not tuition, but room and board, books, and other things to get by. But really, once that money's in your pocket, it's good for anything at that point.
Vegas? Yes. That's what I did with my student loan money. It's a sad thing, but that's kind of what happened. Because I went to school back in the day when you could pretty much just they were just giving it out practically. I mean, you whatever you asked for, and you'd get enough to cover your room and board and your tuition. And I had a scholarship, and they didn't really take that into account. And so I had this full tuition scholarship, but they still gave me the full loan amount. And so I mean, it was really like it was the beginning of every semester was, oh my gosh, I'm rich. Which of course isn't the case. That's not really, but that's what you think of when you're that young, right? Your frontal lobe isn't developed, and you don't make good decisions, and so that's part of the problem too. Is you've got these, we're these kids, and I sound like I'm old, but you have these kids, and the lobe's not developed till you're like 24 or 25, and you're not making the decisions, and you're just confronted with this money, and you're like, yeah, that's money that I can spend. That's my money. It's not your money. It's somebody else's money. You have to pay it back, but you don't think like that. So I think that's part of the problem, is just this idea. You're fresh out of your home, you're making decisions on your own, and then you're confronted with this like huge chunk of money. And what do? Well, you're 19. You go to Vegas. That's what you do.
I was much more responsible with mine. I got this car stereo. Not only not had debt before, or credit at the time, but I don't think I even had much of a real job before that either. So this is really the first money I was seeing. And after tuition and textbooks, it was car stereos.
That's actually pretty important.
But at least you can use that every day.
That's true.
I can't use my trip to Vegas every day.
I did drive my car to school, so it was kind of connected.
Yeah, if you look at the average student and what they're actually spending money on, though, it's pretty clear to me that there's a lot of spending there that doesn't really need to be happening. There's room and board was 26% for the average student, 19% on tuition and fees. Various other things made up about 15%, and then the rest of it, 40%, was on discretionary items: entertainment, apparel, services, travel, vacation, things like that. So beer, yeah, it's probably 20%.
And whatever's left on ramen noodle soup.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Well, it's sort of an interesting phenomenon. It's kind of like when people max out their credit cards. People say, "Oh, well, I'm spending my student loan money because I can't make do with any less." And then, of course, they run out, and then they still manage to live for 3 months or 2 months of the semester just fine. So that's sort of a self-defeating premise there, in that you have actually proven that you could live just fine on that budget. Maybe it wasn't a comfortable existence, but like you say, Zina, there's alternative ways to have fun and stuff. I think there's the weird culture around student debt, and Zina talked about it briefly, where we look at it as, we call it good debt. You'll see all the personal finance websites, mortgage debt and student debt, those are good debt. And then since 2008, now it's just student debt. Mortgage debt is no longer good either, especially if it's rolled up in packages of securities and derivatives, but we won't get into that. So now it's just student debt. Student debt's an investment in your future. But if you use that language, then you must admit it's a relatively terrible investment in most cases, especially for very expensive private schools in the USA specifically. And if we keep this culture up of like, yeah, it's good, borrow money, it's a good investment, at what point will that sort of 5 times inflation rate come down? I don't think it will. The market will continue to soak that up. Universities will continue to find creative ways to take your money and build brand new buildings that don't really need to be built.
Well, and that's what, when I was in high school, I remember I had a professor, I didn't have professors in high school. I had teachers. And
hey, let's not disparage high school teachers.
Glenn's going to be one soon.
No, they were great, and they would always tell me, like, oh, like, when I was in school, I worked the summers, and I worked every semester, and I paid for, like, all my tuition by myself. And I don't know how you could do that right now.
That's how you knew they were old, actually.
Oh, yeah. I mean, they're like 70.
There wasn't a whole lot to teach back then, so it was a lot cheaper. Sorry.
They would share these stories, and I would say, oh, like, wow, like, yeah, you must be really old. And I think back now, and it's just like, I don't know how you could do that. And I think because it does feel so depressing if you really think about it, and there's no education around loans. Like, I don't remember signing up to get my loans. I'm not sure how it happened. And my parents were really great about personal finance. They taught me, like, all this stuff, and even they never sat down and said, okay, you're going to be a journalist, so you're going to make $30,000 a year, maybe. This is what that looks like. This is what your loan payment would look like. And I just never worried. Like, no one ever thought to check that. So, and no one ever thought to say, like, what if you don't get a job? What if you get a job in a really expensive part of the country? Like, no one, there's just no education around it. And I know that, you're 18, you're supposed to be on your own, but, like, no one is that responsible. I don't care who you are. So that's something that really has to change. Like, someone has to teach you what it means, like, before you sign for that loan, which I still don't remember doing.
Someone should write a book about that.
Maybe somebody who would be in the school system.
Wow.
There it
is. Just a thought. Your loans, Zina, were they private loans or were they federally funded?
No, I had Stafford unsubsidized loans.
Okay. So that's a little different from, let's say, a private loan where they can really kind of charge the sky and set their own terms to a degree.
Yeah, and that was one thing that it was definitely, my alarm's going off right now. That was definitely something that when I talk to friends who have private loans, it's like, oh, I need to stop complaining right now. But yeah, so like I have friends who have had to do like deferment or forbearance. And I think those are really great options. I've never done anything like that, but that's one thing I'm grateful for, that I never signed up for any private loans or I don't know, variable interest rate loan or anything like that. So it was pretty lucky in that regard.
I can say that for the Stafford loan, there, at least recently, there is something where you have to go through pages and pages of quote-unquote education, more like gobbledygook, and make sure you understand it and sort of electronically sign that you know what you're getting into. But I'm willing to bet that most people just zip right through and get to the last page. It's not like you're sitting through a class and you really have to learn this stuff. Probably most people couldn't recall what it is that they just read.
Well, the scariest thing for me was I took a personal finance class in college because I'm so cool. And it was...
Keep telling yourself that.
Yeah.
I took one too.
The craziest part...
I did not.
Oh, it was so fun. It was a really easy class. But it was offered through the business school, and it was a really good business school, but it didn't count toward credit for any of the business majors. So no one who was actually a business major took it because it wouldn't help them get their degree. And I had a friend who was in the business school, and when I asked him for help, like with, I think it was a chapter on mortgage amortization, he was like, I don't know how to do that. And I thought, oh, like, you're majoring in accounting and you don't know what an amortization schedule is? And I thought, oh, holy, we're in trouble. Like, this country is in trouble. And I thought, if they're not teaching you business kids this, and they're sure as hell not teaching us liberal arts students this, who is learning it?
Yeah, let's
that explains a lot, actually.
A lot of adults, who've been working for a while and being on their own for a while, have trouble with their finances. I mean, let's face it, that's kind of why we're here, helping people out. So to expect people who are in their teens to be able to budget money that's just kind of thrown into their pockets, maybe at best you've worked a week and gotten a paycheck, and now you're having maybe thousands of dollars show up. That's a lot to ask a young adult, I think. But let's go back to reiterate that there are different types of student loans. So the private ones, they tend to have much higher interest rates, and they're not easy to get rid of. Those are the ones that can really, really hurt you. Not that the federally funded ones, the Staffords, are great because their interest rates have inched up as well. But at least from everywhere I see it, you want to try to avoid those private ones. And those are certainly.
I don't think I know anyone who has them, but I've had a few blog readers say, like, oh, I have my private loans and they're just killing me, and I also have my federal ones, and I think and that's another thing, like, no one really realizes the difference when you sign up. Like, I think you just kind of think a loan is a loan. Mm-hmm. And even with federal loans, like, there are so many different ones you could get that it's so complicated. It's so complicated.
Now, I mean, I think we've talked a lot about, how stifling a loan can be, but maybe let's just backtrack and just talk a little bit about why it's a good idea to pay them off early. And what are your benefits by really putting extra into it? And maybe not paying off what you're supposed to pay, but paying more to it to get rid of it.
For me, it was really just the psychological effect of it. Like I said, I really felt like it was tying me down, and the main reason I wanted to pay them off super early, I paid them off in 3 years at graduation, is that my boyfriend and I were pretty serious at the time, and I thought, well, we get married in the next few years, like, that's going to be his debt. Whether or not he signed up for it, like, that will be his, and that will be coming out of our, joint account. And he didn't have any student loans or any debt, so I thought, I don't want to put that on him, and I just want to see. It was almost like an internal challenge, like, let's just see how quickly I can do this. And I feel like a lot of people in their, early 20s graduating from college, they put off a lot of things. They put off saving and creating an emergency fund and starting a 401k and paying off their loans. And I think that feels like very, adult stuff. And it is really hard to figure out if you've never done it and your parents never taught you. So I think it's like, oh, well, when I'm 30, I'll think about that. Like, I'll think about that later. And I figure, the older I get, the more expenses I'll have. At some point, I'll probably own a house, and there's always a reason not to do something. And I thought, well, when I'm 22, I can get away with living like a poor person. And so I might as well do it when I'm 22 and no one thinks it's weird that I shop at Goodwill. Because when I'm 30, people might see it as a hindrance. Even though I probably still will be doing that.
So how are you...
Macklemore's
I've got
made it
relatives in
cool
their
now.
50s.
That's all good.
I was going to say, I've got relatives in their 50s making 6 figures still shopping at Goodwill.
you could find good stuff there.
Yeah, we have a very high-end Goodwill store in our neighborhood here. So.
But there was a stigma in some areas to it, too. How were you able to make that a priority and get the funds together to pay off so much of your loans in 3 years?
Honestly, I think I just realized that how little I actually needed. And, after paying for the basic necessities and still trying to save some money just for an emergency fund, I kind of realized, like, oh, well, I don't need as many new clothes as I used to buy, and I don't need to go out for dinner as much as I used to. And, I honestly, a lot of it was just starting to read a lot of blogs. Get Rich Slowly, obviously, was a really big one for me, just finding really cheap recipes to make. At some point I was like requesting like free samples of shampoo every day, so I wouldn't have to buy shampoo for $50, which is probably a little insane, but I think you have to be insane if you try to do something like pay off your loans in 3 years while I'm all making $30,000.
Well, maybe the other way to look at it though is maybe it's just insane to take out so many loans. Not that I'm putting anything on your shoulders. It's obviously what we all do. It's the culture, but to pay it off, maybe that's the sane thing to do.
Yeah, it's hard because I think I don't know anyone else, like personally, not online, who's tried to do what I've done. So I always look like the outsider when people are like, "Oh, why aren't you going to lunch with us?" I'm like, "Well, can't put $10 toward eating out," and then you just look like a total Scrooge and a cheapskate. So.
But on the other hand, now when you get your paycheck, you have that much more of a buffer zone because you don't have to worry about the payment.
Oh yeah, now I'm like, hey, like let's go out. So,
it's way more embarrassing to have your $60,000 BMW hauled away when you're 40 because all your loans have finally been collected. I would guess. It's never happened to me, but I would assume that would be more embarrassing than skipping out a $10 lunch.
Yeah.
It's amazing what people take personally and what people shame you with. I did have someone ask when I turned down an offer to go out to lunch if I ever have fun. And, you can tell I'm a fun person. So it was like, yeah, I have fun, but, eating out with your boss is, not that fun, guys. So, just kidding. If he's watching, I love him.
If the boss is so much fun, how come he's not flipping the bill?
Right.
But yeah, so I did have a few people being like, "Oh, why aren't you doing that?" Or if I said I wasn't buying something or doing something or complaining about the cost of something, I think it does look a little suspicious. So, but
yeah, people like to throw the cheap thing around, but without knowing the full story and understanding what you're trying to do. I've certainly seen that where, there was times I was trying to pay off my credit card and be like, no, I can't go out this night or I can't do this particular thing. And they're like, oh, but it's only this much money. And it's like, yeah, it's only this much money now, but if I do this for this much money and that for that much money and that for that much money, it starts to all add up and then it's a whole lot of money that I don't have. So any other ways that maybe we could try to make it a priority or how to make it so that we're putting money towards our student debt?
I think what a lot of people do is they try to say, well, if there's money at the end of the month, then I'll put that toward my loans or I'll save that. And I know you hear this a lot of times, pay yourself first. But it really is if I figured out, okay, if I want to pay my loans off in this amount of time, then this is how much I have to put toward them. And that first year, I really didn't have like too much leeway in my budget, so I just decided, well, I'm not going to get a second job because it wouldn't really work with my schedule, and I've made all the cuts to my budget that I really can. So any extra money I have, like, I'll just put it toward my loans. So if I freelanced a month, then I would like put that toward my loans, birthday money, Christmas money. A lot of times I would open up like different bank accounts, offer sign-up bonuses if you like do direct deposit. And I got very friendly with our HR person because every 2 weeks I would like come up to her with like a different direct deposit form. Because it'd be like $100 every time. And that first year, I think I earned like $1,000, which was a lot of money for basically, not a lot of work. So little things like that, like I think it's just figuring out, okay, what am I willing to do to pay this off, and what am I not willing to do? I know some people, they'll get a second job, or they'll get roommates or something like that. So I think you just kind of have to realize that if you want to do something hard, you're going to have to give up a lot of things. But that's your choice. Like for me, like I wanted to pay off my loans. Like no one was forcing me. It's not like they were due in 3 years. So it was like, well, what can I, if that's my priority, then something else has to fall.
So it's really looking at your whole lifestyle and figuring out what really was important for you. And for you, it was getting rid of that loan. So you were able to cut away a lot of stuff to get to that point.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think it really is. It is personal for a lot of people with their loans. Some people are okay with if they have a low interest loan of just floating that loan and paying the minimum payments. For me personally, I hated having student loan debt. I wanted to get rid of it as fast as I could. So, my wife didn't have any student loan debt when we got married. So she was helping. She had a job at the time. She was helping me to pay off my loan as well. And we just put that as a line item in our budget. And instead of just paying the minimum like we had to, we would double up the payment and have that be part of our budget and send that in every time. And then if we got extra amounts of money from a tax refund or a little extra money from some freelance work or whatever, we would just take that and put it right towards it. And we didn't pay ours off or mine off in 3 years like Zina did, but it it was 5 years after I graduated that we had all the loans paid off. So it really is about whether that's a priority for you.
Mm-hmm. And it's funny, you mentioned the tax refund, and I know this time around, this time of year, I'm hearing it a lot. People saying, oh, well, I want to buy this, and oh, I've got tax money coming in. And if I had to list my financial pet peeves, I think it would be people using their refunds for something fun. And I'm not saying you can't do that, but like to me, it's like, like if you're getting a big refund, you're probably doing something wrong. And which is a whole other topic. But I think it's like you said, Peter, if you have a plan for it, if my grandma gave me $200 and I didn't know it was coming, I already had a plan for it. I knew that, if she ever gives me any money, that's going toward my loans. So when she gave it to me, I just go to the bank, cash it, make an extra payment for my loans. So I think if you get it and you start wondering, what can I do with it? Then you start thinking of fun things you can do instead of maybe what you really want to use it for.
Make a plan for your money or it's going to disappear.
Yeah, I think a little bit of that is a little bit of entitlement in that you get done school and you've been promised all these things by the institution because obviously they want you to take out that debt and pay them. So you feel like you're sort of entitled now. You've been working hard. You need to get that new car, and there's a 0% interest car loan, so you can get that. And there's all these different things. Maybe you need to rent a bigger place, or else you're done with roommates now. You're not a student anymore. You don't want to live like that. And sort of all these entitlement, I don't know where it comes from or how it develops, but it seems pretty widespread, pretty universal in North America at least. And I think it prevents a lot of people from making those sacrifices that you guys were talking about.
Yeah,
so. Oh, sorry.
Yeah, I was really confused for a while when I saw all my friends had really nice cars after graduation, and I'm in, driving my 13-year-old Toyota, which I love, and I was like, oh, where are these cars coming from? Like, what is this magic? And then I found out, like, they all had loans for them. I was like, oh, like, why didn't you tell me this is how you're funding your lifestyle? Like, I thought you must be really rich, or, you know, like, we must be making different life choices, because it never occurred to me that you wouldn't, like, pay, like, you wouldn't keep your junker around as long as possible. Like, why would you get a car payment if you didn't have to?
Well, you know that the car most often owned by millionaires is a Toyota. So there you go.
But no, I was gonna kind of say to Kyle's point of entitlement, we kind of think, oh, and I think Zina mentioned this a little bit earlier as well. We think, oh well, we're doing all we can. And I remember when my husband and I were first married, and I had one more semester of school left, and he still had a year and a half of school left. And we were like, oh, well, we can't spend any less. We are, like, living to the bone. We've cut, and oh my gosh, we're down. We're down to the bare necessities. We're spending on just the bare necessities. And then we sat down and looked, and it's like, no, we're still paying for cable. We go out to eat once a week. We're buying, you know, we started looking at it, we're like, no, we feel like we're living a subsistence lifestyle, but we're really not. And I think part of that goes back to that entitlement. We're like, oh, well, we have to have cable. We have to have the iPhone. Well, iPhones didn't exist back then, but, you know, you have to say, there's a whole new set of things that we need to have. But these are actually luxuries. Many of the needs we have now are actually luxuries. And when you start taking a real hard look at it, you start to realize that, no, you can cut a little bit more. I don't like to anymore because I don't like sacrifice. But we did look at our stuff and say, no, you know, we could be cutting more, and we really aren't living, you know, we really haven't cut to the bone yet.
I think a lot of where this keeping up with the Joneses and this lifestyle inflation comes from is, instead of us looking at our actual budgets and seeing what we spend our money on and where it's actually going, we look to see other people, and we figure, well, if they can afford the car, if they can afford the student loan, if they can afford that, and we're very much similar, then I must be able to do it too. Mm-hmm. And then we kind of bank on that, we hope on that, and it doesn't really work out. You know, when we see these new cars, we don't know their story. You know, we don't know if mom and dad gave it to them. We don't know if they're paying through the nose for it. You know, but we just see the car and we think we can do it. And I think that happens to a lot of us, and it's a hard thing. I think a big step is making sure you actually look at your budget and seeing what's going into it and what's going out, and then matching it that way. You know, like you said, Miranda, once you started looking at things, you actually were able to find more that you were able to cut back on, and we probably all have that. So let's talk about this, because I think it's sort of come up. But what's the opportunity cost of paying off your student debt loans early? You know, is it always a wise idea? You know, what are you missing out on if you're paying so much towards your student loans?
Well, you're losing out on that early compounding. If you want to start retirement saving, you want to start saving, you can take a little more risk in your portfolio without losing sleep, or mathematically you can anyway, whether that's your style or not. So I think that's what you're losing by and large. Some people will tell you, oh, you're losing out on maybe getting into a house a little earlier and that sort of thing. But for me, I think the main thing for a lot of young grads that have already put off saving for 5 or 6 years is that retirement savings, and you're losing out on some sort of prime investment window there.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah, so... No, go ahead.
Yeah, that was one thing that always kind of bugged me, because I had read so much about personal finance, and I knew, like, I should be putting money toward retirement. I had started a IRA when I was in college, so that gave me some kind of reassurance that, like, okay, at least I already have this. And then I had, like, a kind of a Scottrade account that I opened in high school and forgot about. But that was something I freaked out about, because I thought, well, am I doing this right? You know, like, what am I giving up? But my interest rate was so high that, you know, is it worth it? So that was one thing that Rose struggled with. And the one thing I never did was, once I became eligible for my 401k and there was a match with it, then I put enough to get the match. Because I think a lot of people will sacrifice that as well. And that's something that doesn't really make a lot of sense to me.
So what do you think is the balance point or the pivot point there? Where do you go, you know what, I should put the money towards the student loan, or I should find some other place to maybe put that money? And I'm not talking about putting that money into buying more movies or wherever else. You know, you have a set amount of money that you want to put towards something. Where do you figure that balance out? Any type of guidelines that anybody here would think of?
Well, I think you look at what's your long-term annualized return potential for what you're getting. Since I'm old and I consolidated my debt 10 years ago, and when I graduated, I have a interest rate of less than 2% on my federal student loans. So I don't want to pay them off early, because even at the worst of the stock market and just the way my portfolio was set up and everything, because I didn't have everything in stocks, but even in the worst of the financial crisis and the recession, my investment portfolio still outperformed the interest on my student loans. And then once you add in the tax deduction that comes, it's not super fantastic or anything, but it's still there. Putting my money somewhere else, just to me, like with the math, makes more sense. So I think if you're oriented in that way and you're looking just straight at the math and it's not a gut punch to you, then I think that can make sense. If you can say, well, I can get a better return for my money. Do I want a 1.9% return on my money, minus the tax deduction, and that, or do I want this, 5% annualized return, and it's actually higher than that now? So you kind of have to balance that and say, well, where is my money going to do the most good?
And I don't have a lot of patience.
Sorry, I was just going to say, you got to make sure that you don't get too overconfident, too, because Zina, you're 6%,
right.
Was it?
6.8.
Yeah, and someone could look at that and say, well,
yeah.
I'm going to make 10, so I'll just invest in
That's a good point. And that's the thing is, even at the most conservative, mine is,
yours is a lot.
Even the really conservative, because of how low the interest rate is, and I'm really fortunate in that way.
Yeah, I think a lot of it, on the one hand, it's a mathematical equation where you look at the interest rates on what you could possibly be making with your investments and how much your interest is on your loan. On the other hand, it's not just a mathematical equation. It's the psychological for the individual. Some people are going to be more okay with carrying that loan and paying it off over time, whereas other people, like me, I just hate having that weight on my shoulders and thinking, oh man, I've got that $20,000 worth of debt sitting there. I just want to get rid of it. So, it's kind of a balancing act, I think, for a lot of people, balancing the mathematical side of it, looking at what's best with the math, and then what's best for your own well-being and your psychological well-being.
Yeah, I think Tom makes a great point about not getting too cocky about it, too, because you might hear, oh, historically you can make 8%, let's say, but that doesn't mean you will make 8%. And it also depends on what you put the money into. If you say, I'm going to put all this money into Apple stock because they're doing great, well, who knows, for the next 3 years they might tank, and then, you're really not doing as well as you thought you would be doing. Maybe you want to be a little conservative with what you're investing in, just to make sure that you have a return that would give good odds to doing better than what your interest rate is.
Yeah, for me, I didn't really do any math on it, but I knew because my interest rate was so high that it would probably benefit me more to put that extra money toward my loans. But it was like 100% psychological, because I think, like, I see people do things, like take really long vacations or, move across the country, and they have student loans, and I think, oh my God, like, you did that. And for me, it feels like now I have so much more freedom to, if I want to move somewhere, I can do that. And if I want to save, 15% for retirement, like, I can do that freely now. So I feel like I just kind of had to, give up some things for a little bit to do what I do now. But it's such a personal decision that unless, like, the math is really obvious, like it is for you, Miranda, that I feel like you just kind of have to do what will make you feel better.
I think the psychological aspect is very important. You know, it's how you feel and how it's going to affect you, because having the loans on your shoulder, on your back, it does weigh down on a lot of people. So to be able to lift that up, I mean, does a lot in helping them to move forward in other areas as well.
Oh yeah, definitely. And there are definitely people who don't want that obligation and don't want to be beholden and paying any interest at all, and that's understandable. And I think that if that's your orientation, then yeah, you should just pay it off no matter what the math says. If it's going to create a pit in your stomach and it's going to cause you grief and you're going to lose sleep over it, then it's better to be done with it.
Now let me throw out a question here, and you tell me if this is nuts or not, but should student loans even exist? Should it be possible to take out $20, $30, $40, $50, $100,000 to go to school? Is that something that should be even allowed? Should our society tolerate that? Are there other ways that we should be thinking about this whole issue of educating the public?
Well, first of all, I think it's worth saying, well, part of the reason why it costs so much to go to school is because of this kind of bubble we've created. Everybody has to go, and not only does everybody have to go, but it's so expensive that everybody has to get student loans. If we weren't in this situation, I mean, does it really need to cost $100,000? Is it?
Well, Miranda's breaking up a little bit. But yeah, it does form a bubble, and the bubble's not that different from mortgage bubbles. The easier it is to get the loans, the more people that are going to get them, the more money that's in society, the more that's going to feed into the schools, and then all of a sudden it costs more and more and more, and it does just keep going. And like we've mentioned, the cost of tuition is growing astronomically. It's exponential compared to what wages are.
I think a lot of the problem could fix itself, Glenn. If we just, I mean, I know I'm a teacher, so I default to this lens all the time, this high school educational lens, but if we gave kids the information and their parents the information, and we're doing a terrible job of it right now, right across the board, absolutely atrocious job of explaining the job market, of explaining personal finance, of explaining the idea of looking at education credentials as not just a lifestyle choice, but an investment return. If we did a better job of that, and kids would actually understand, and their parents would understand sort of the post-secondary thing a little bit better and make better decisions. And that would take the price down on its own. These institutions can only survive as long as people keep paying $50,000 a year to go to school. And businesses are quickly learning that that person that read the first-year reading list at NYU is the exact same as the person that read that exact same reading list at Community College X. Like Chaucer and Hamlet and whatever, a little bit of Dickens or whatever the case is, it's all the same. Economics 101, it's the same textbook at Small Town University X as it is at NYU. I don't know why I'm picking on NYU. I've never been on their campus, but it seemed like a good thing to pick on. I don't know.
It's like a backhanded stab at me because I'm from New York. Is that it?
Everyone always blamed the Ivies. It felt good to go after someone other than the Ivies.
Yeah, I agree completely with what he was just saying, Kyle. And I think too many people attend college with no sort of a plan either. They don't know what major they're going to do, what they really want to accomplish with their degree, and I don't think they probably get enough help in high school figuring all these things out as far as thinking about the return on their investment. A lot of times it ends up being an equation. Joe and John are going to this school. I want to go there too and party with them. So really, I think people need to be thinking more about why they're going to school, what they want to do with their degree, and for some people, maybe college isn't the best choice. Maybe there's a technical school they can go to, or some other career that it doesn't necessarily involve college.
Well, and I'll say I went to a private school growing up, and a lot of the girls I went to school with, most of them, their parents had much more money, and so they, like, a lot of people I went to school with were going to private colleges, and I'm thinking, okay, well, I want to go to private school, and I applied to NYU and USC, and I was so happy when I got my acceptance letters, and my dad looked at me and he said, "You are not paying $40,000 a year to be a journalist." and I was heartbroken. I loved both of those schools. They were like they were really good for journalism for what I wanted to do, and I was just so upset and I was so angry at just thinking about like all these upper class people I went to school with that they didn't have to worry about that. They did not have to make a decision based on money. They could just go to whatever school they wanted to go to, and so that bothered me for a while. And then I got to college, and I feel like I had as good of experience as I might have anywhere else. And there is like this pressure to go to Harvard or to go to that big name school, and no one tells you that it's what you do that matters and not necessarily where you go. And that's what worries me, is that it's like this push that, okay, well, this is a better school, this is a better name, it's going to look better, and I have to go here and pay out for it.
Yeah, and study after study shows that that's a ridiculous premise. It just doesn't hold true anymore. And anyone that hires people knows that, frankly.
But let's go to your point of educating people better. We're not educating people who are full-on adults better. And similar to Zina, I took a personal finance course in college. It was an economics elective, and most of the class, they were younger than me. And, they heard it might have been an easy elective. They just wanted to get it done with. They really didn't care about what the topics were. And here it is. It's a college course that we were taking. I loved it because it was kind of in my wheelhouse already. But you could tell a lot of the students really didn't have much of a care in it. So how do you get that education? Educating the people better just doesn't seem to work.
So I got a couple observations, not sure if they're magic bullets, but first thing is your college professor, and again, this is brought to you by my teachers union, that college professor is not trained in education. They're just smart, which doesn't mean they're good at teaching anybody. Well, hopefully they're smart, assuming they have a degree. But anyway,
that's a whole other.
In high school, we've got you trapped to that seat. If we make high school the point of entry, you are there no matter what, and you're used to taking stuff in. And I think there's a little bit less competing for your time than in college for most people. So I think it represents a little bit of a better cross-section at that point. I mean, you're still going to get a lot of tune-out and a lot of stuff's going to sort of wash over, but I think with the more media stuff that comes out and the more blogs that come out and the more press that these people with $200,000 art history student loans have, the more times we see that story, the more people are going to realize, man, I really need to look into this. And right now we're just caught in this weird transition phase between like the 1960s economy where people are like, nope, go to school, you'll get a great paying job, it's a path to riches, and the modern economy where it's like, no, the correlation is really foggy. Like, we don't know. There's some areas where it is like that. There's a lot of areas where it's not, and you sort of have to do your own research.
And I think that's a good point. We've talked about this on the show before. What degree is worth it, and what's going to be worth it as far as getting the degree, whether you need to go to grad school, all of that kind of plays into it. There are plenty of good jobs you can get with a 2-year degree or a special certification, and so looking into that makes sense. The assumption that we all have to have 4-year liberal arts degrees, I think, is pretty faulty and once again feeds into this. So going back to Glenn's original question, I think if we could, I think some sort of basic training or education might not be a bad idea if we can bring the cost down.
I just wonder if there's some kind of behavioral economics point of, we probably all value ourselves much higher than we think we are. How many people are going out there saying, for X job, yeah, I know I'm not going to make a lot of money. Nobody thinks that they're going to have like a cruddy job. They think that somehow or other it's going to build up. Maybe in the beginning it's not going to make a lot, but I don't think people generally go, for the rest of my life I'm just not going to make a lot of money. Even though we're in college, it's just not going to happen. So I think there's sort of that failure too, when we start to ask people to look at what you're going to go into and will you make that money or not.
Right.
Do you think maybe that university college, community college, should it be something that is for the good of the people? Should taxes pay for it, or some other system? Like, should we have to pay so much for it? We don't pay for it. We have public school up through high school, so why not extend it a little bit more?
Right. So I think it just depends on, what kind of investment you think it is in society. Do you think that it's an investment in society to have a more educated populace, or do you think it's just going to, make people who think too much? Really?
Yeah, I don't know. In my personal life, and for the record, I think we've got a pretty good balance here in Canada, generally speaking, when it comes to the personal versus government side of it. But in my experience, there's very little correlation between people that go to high-priced universities and general intelligence and people who start their own business or go to community schools. I don't buy into the idea that your basic reading list on a 3- and 4-year degree that people can skate through with C's and B's makes you a smarter person or a better person or a better functioning adult in a democracy. I don't see the evidence for that.
Well, yeah, I guess it goes back to what kind of education. Are we talking about skills education, or are we talking about your general education?
Well, okay, so you're always going to have private universities. Some university that's going to be the prestige and it's going to cost a lot of money. We know that. Should there be more universities, though, that maybe are public universities that are free? There are certainly a lot where the cost is less. We could go back to digging on NYU. When I first went to school, I went to Baruch College, which was kind of up the block from NYU. And we always hated the NYU people because they always had a campus that was the Village in New York, and it was great, and we just had a few buildings that were scattered all over the place. But my tuition, I could tell you, was probably the cost of their books. and the generation before me, it was free. So, there is a big difference. Should something like that be covered for people who might really want to go?
I think it would be nice. I think that it would be. I mean, one of the things I do like about the Canadian system is that a lot of them, there's that credit that's offered, right? That Savers credit that you can use to kind of help boost your RESP, right?
20% boost automatically. Yep.
Thank you.
Yeah, 20% boost up to $500 a year. So.
Yeah. So I mean, I think something like that where you can kind of get a little help with that. I mean, we have our 529s. And, thank heavens that's off the table now. But
for now. Yeah,
for now. So I think something like that to encourage people. I don't know that it's practical to say, oh, well, everybody can go free just because we have such a large and diverse population. It's nice that everybody points to Scandinavian countries and say, oh, well, look what they can do. They've made it free for everybody, and that's so fabulous. And it is fabulous, and it's great, but one of the reasons why they can do things like that is they've got a much smaller and a much more homogenous population. And this is really hard for me to say because, I'm a liberal and, of course I just think that everybody should have everything for free all the time. But I don't know that that's practical to just say straight up, 2 years of college for free. I do not know how practical that is in our current economy and with the current realities of our system.
I think, too, there's something to be said for putting more value in your education when you're paying for it, too. If everybody's getting it for free, a lot of the times, it's free, it's no big deal. I'm not going to take it as seriously because I'm not actually paying for it. So, to me, I had to pay for a lot of my own education, and because of that, I think I took it more seriously. It's like I'm paying thousands of dollars a year to go to the school. I'm going to get the most out of it. I'm going to get up for that 8 a.m. class, even though I was out last night, because I don't want to flunk this class. So, to a degree, I think there's something to be said for that too.
I think we should stop making people feel bad if they, they're not the type who should go to college. Like, there's nothing wrong with going to a trade school or doing something else, and I feel like there's a lot of stigma around it. And you can make a good living, plumbing or electrical work, and there's no shame in that. But I feel like I know so many people who, if they didn't go to college, they kind of have a chip on their shoulder, and even if they're working in the same job, they're still kind of like, oh, well, they don't have a degree. So I feel like when you're telling everyone that, well, if you don't go to school, then you're not as good, then that creates that higher demand for it.
The degree itself
definitely.
is that keeping up with the Joneses. So I think we've gone into a really great discussion here, and I think we could spin off that last bit into its own show about whether education should be free or not. But we're kind of coming up to our time limit here, so I think we'll go around and do a final word on paying off student debt loans, and before we close out. So Kyle, if you'll give us your final word on paying off student debt loans.
Paying off student debt loans, I'm going to do a bit of an infomercial for Manitoba and some of the other Canadian provinces. School is already free if you come here. If you stay at Manitoba for 6 years after you graduate, you'll get 60% of your tuition back. It's the exact same in Saskatchewan, which is twice as much fun to say as Manitoba, and it's right next door. And we'll give you money just for working after you graduate. We'll give you your tuition back. So if you combine the tax credits and that money back, if you stay in province, you will effectively have a free education already.
So the economic part of me says, Kyle's just invited a bunch of people over there, but now housing prices are going to go up because everybody's moving in now for the free education.
Bring your children to secure my job as a teacher here. Yeah.
And Miranda, your final word on student debt loans.
Yeah, so kind of going along with Kyle's theme there, the U.S., does have some programs where you can get some of your student loans paid back. My mother is actually, getting a little help with her student loans getting paid back because where she has chosen to teach after finishing her teaching degree. So there's those things to think about. Things like AmeriCorps will help you. Joining the military, although I know a lot of people don't want to do that right now. And other civil service type things can help you pay your loans back. So that's something to think about as well, along with kind of following up on Kyle's thought there. If you're willing to make a certain, I guess you could call it a sacrifice, there are ways to get a little help paying off your student loans. And then the other thing, of course, is if you can stomach it, run the numbers and see if it's really worth it to pay it off early.
All right, Peter, your final word on paying off student debt loans.
Yeah, well, basically, my thoughts on this topic are, the average debt for somebody in the U.S. for a 4-year degree is $33,000. In Canada, it's $26,000 in 2014. So for me, it really goes back to thinking about these things before you get into the debt. Start thinking about this when you're in high school. Think about what you want to do with your life. Have a plan. Think about what kind of a degree you want to get, or even if you need to go to college before you get into that debt. But once you do decide you want to go ahead with that, make sure again you have a plan. Think about having a budget while you're in school. Maybe cut down on those discretionary expenditures while you're in school just a little bit, and save some of those costs so that you're not paying them for years and years down the road.
And Tom, what's your final word?
I think student loans can be pretty useful, but yeah, make sure you actually have a job that can pay for them. Don't go to a big expensive university to find yourself. Like, you got to make sure there's that return on investment. If you're going to take out the loan, make sure you can pay it off quickly, like Zina did, if you can. Especially if it's a higher rate nowadays. Like, make sure that what you're investing in with that student loan actually pays for itself.
And Zina, if you'll close out our final word on paying off student debt loans.
I would tell people that everyone should just get a budget. I didn't have one in college because I thought my expenses were too irregular to do that, which is a really lame excuse. And then once I started getting one, I realized how much I was spending. So I think it's really easy to, like Miranda said earlier, to think like you're living the bare bones and you're doing the best you can. And most people aren't. So that's what I would say, is just to get a budget, figure out where you can cut, because I mean, we can all cut, we can all make some cuts. So that's what I would say. Especially if you're in school, you don't need as much beer money as you think.
I don't know. Kyle might disagree.
Disagree, yeah.
I think Kyle will say that there's ways to get that money. Just not looking into it, maybe.
Extra work study for that.
So thank you so much, Zina, for joining us. For our audience out there, can you tell them a little bit about what you do and where they could find more information about you?
Yeah, so I write about how I pay off my loans, and I write about saving, budgeting, just living a good life on less at debtfreeafter3.com. You can find me at Twitter at Zina Kumok, ZinaKumok.
Great, and thank you again for joining us. And for everybody out there, thank you for watching and listening. And until next week, be good with your money.
Thanks for joining us on the Money Mastermind Show. Get more information at moneymastermindshow.com. Don't forget to subscribe to the show on iTunes and YouTube and follow us on Google+.